Go ahead.
Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting parents whose children have passed. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at this meeting is voluntary. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Discussions here are confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who've passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here with us this evening, and thank you, Jacob, for being here with us.
Yes, welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us. If you would like to put in the chat box who you are, where you're from, if you are an affiliate leader, a caring listener, or a board member, so that we can recognize you as well. And we're just so happy that you're here to listen to Jacob, who is such an old soul. And he's also someone who has been a part of helping parents heal for a long time, even though he's very young. And I'm going to go ahead and read his short bio, and then he will tell you about his very important topic this evening, which is about how near-death experiences and shared death experiences allow us to know more about spirituality. And it really is something that's so interesting. His two books are fascinating, and I'll tell you about them in the bio. He's passionate about promoting healing and the best-selling author of Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. So Jacob is a near-death experiencer who had this happen very young, kind of like Dr. Ingrid Honkala, that I know that a lot of you know as well, and sought-after speaker on mental health and spirituality consciousness, offering elevating seminars and individualized services to help others find purpose and connect to their inner power. His website is www.jacoblcooper.com. And without further ado, please join me and Irene in welcoming the amazing Jacob Cooper. Welcome, Jacob. We're so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Irene. Such an honor to be here in front of all these brilliant, shining lights. And, it's my sincere hope that through today, the information that you're able to get could potentially, inform some of your beliefs, and hopefully that could allow you to, just see the world in a different way. As before we get into some of the slides, the people know me as a near-death experiencer. That's true. But there came a point in time where I didn't even have that term. It wasn't until someone gifted a book to me by an author named Betty Adie called Embraced by the Light that I recognized there was a term for what I had. And that changed everything for myself, knowing that there was a term such as an NDE. And so my hope today is really to spell out some of these transformative experiences and really go over what they are, but more importantly, what we can do with them and how they can change us. Because I ultimately believe each and every participant in their own way in front of me here tonight has had their own transformation and has had a moment where, darkness has, come to them, but you've been able to see and find glimpses of an eternal awareness behind that. And I hope through every presentation, that's coming in a little bit more. So I'm going to open up um, my slideshow, and this is a little bit new for me. I may look young, I hope I do, but I am not the most tech savvy guy, but we're going to put out energy that this is going to be all good. So let's get to it. So here we are, and okay, and I'm going to just click slideshow on. Okay, bear with me for just one moment from beginning. Okay. Okay. So today's topic again is awareness and integration of spiritual transformative experience, or STEs. And for tonight, we're just going to be going over and really discussing what NDEs and spiritual transformative experiences are, hearing a little bit about my NDE and what, that has taught myself. Number three, practices and tips to really integrate spirituality and higher consciousness in your lives, as well as understanding different forms of transformative experiences that can include out-of-body experiences, shared death experiences, terminal lucidity, and more. And we're going to also be getting into shining lights and how I believe that could be, as spiritual transformative experiences for all of you. And if time permits, hopefully we could have a Q&A as well as guiding meditation. If we do not get into the guided meditation, you could also go on my YouTube channel where that guided meditation is available to you. So let's get into some of this stuff. Um, I think it's important to discuss near-death experiences because there's a growing part of the population that's roughly estimated 5 to 10% of the population that are having these experiences. And so it's very important to understand these things because it may be one of you sitting here and you're not certain. Just today, I met with someone who was not sure of what they had, and I said, have you thought that you had an NDE? And then she was really able to all of a sudden see her experience in a new way, and she was able to have just this umbrella and a term for it. And it could be very difficult when you're having something, there's nothing to identify it with. Certainly, I work in the mental health field and I could see the pros and cons of diagnosis and labels, but ultimately, they could allow us a bit of a path of identity and purpose. And I think that could be healing for a lot of people. Um, and so just wanted to just define by starting with the spiritual transformative experience, or STE. Spiritual transformative experience can be a profound and life-altering event that changes an individual's understanding of themselves, their place in the world, and their relationship to something greater than themselves. These experiences often involve a sense of transcendence and can lead to shifts in beliefs, values, and identity. And so you don't have to necessarily have something that it directly impacts your body, such as a near-death experience, to have a spiritual transformative experience. It could be through what we can identify as crisis, or a very challenging moment where all of a sudden the foundation that we were standing on, much like a near-death experience, is rocked, by whatever you want to call it, the universe or God, whatever that is. And all of a sudden, there's a part of us that's able to really either listen to an inner voice deep within that knows more than what's in front of us, or this light, that's brighter than the challenges in front of us, or we're able to just have a memory of that we're something more than just this challenge in front of us. And so, sometimes through shake-up periods of life, we could either kind of sit with it and resist it, or it could lead us to shift our perspectives and our vantage point. And so, um, that's important. And a lot of people have a hard time with changes. But I'd say The only thing that is real is that which doesn't change. And I do believe that love is the only force that changes. That does not change. Everything else in this temporary world goes through changes. You take your body. I'll always ask my clients, like like your body right now is, I don't know, 30, 40 years old, but what happened to your 5-year-old body or 10-year-old body, 15-year-old body? All those things that we identify with, come and go. And so the things we hold on to in this reality come and go, but the dynamics that we have with love and our loved ones, those are the things that go on. And that's the only thing to me that is real. Everything else in this reality is a constant change and a shift. And oftentimes through these hardships, we could remember, the only thing that is real. And one of the gifts that can happen from spiritual transformative experiences, and this is a post that I had recently, is that spiritual transformatives or spiritual awakenings by themselves, I do not believe necessarily change someone, but how we live our lives and what we do with them can. And I'll give a specific example. I had a near-death experience at the age of 3, which I really at times struggle with. I didn't see it as a blessing for quite some time because, what does every kid want to do is to be normal. And when you have this experience, you're kind of othered and you're looked at in a different way. And that was hard. But once I recognized that this wasn't so much about me, but rather it was a gift to be shared with other people, as well as something that perhaps could alter how I look at the world. It really, took a whole new form. And then I was able to live out not the karma, which I do believe is a story, but rather the dharma of what happened, which to me is the purpose and the meaning. And so I think with all of us, we walked into different occurrences in life, and that's not our fault. But what we get from that, that is from person to person, and it could be something that would be of meaning and of purpose, and that something that could lead to empathy and uplifting the lives that we encounter on a daily basis. So I will go through some of these slides. And for there's a lot of people who say, I've never had any of these experiences. How do I get there? And I just say it's important to tune in because when you tune in, that which is what we see as supernatural becomes a norm. And I notice this with a lot of my colleagues who are tuned in. They just see all these things happening in front of them. They look at the world, through every day is an opportunity and a miracle. And they're seeing all these, ties that are coming together. And so I think if anything else, the practice of mindfulness, being present, being aware, and having an attitude of gratitude, which can be hard when we have every justification to not have that through parts of our lives. But I ultimately do believe that when we're aware and present, we could all transform, our very lives. Um, this is a picture of obviously the planet, and what spiritual transformative experiences can do is, they could allow the same world that we're living on to be totally seen in a different way. And so I always ask you this question. If you have doubts, skepticism about any of this stuff, I think that's perfectly healthy and normal. But what I would ask is, if we are only this body, and that's only the way that we see ourselves, then we also have to ask the question, well, we're also in a chair, in a room, in a house, on a spinning planet around the globe. So on a mere physical basis, we are all so much more than how we see ourselves. Now just imagine the things that we don't necessarily see with the physical eyes and how much more we are and the loved ones that we're connected to, are as well. So, that's something that always, sticks with me. And, certainly, when, um, we always have a construct in this reality of what normal is, which is really something that I view as humanly construct, as I've found. But to me, I do believe each and every one of us are paranormal. We all, to me, paranormal is is the normal. We all are eternal spiritual beings having these human experiences. And so what I really learned throughout growing up was I was oftentimes called weird or different or an oddball. But once I was able to own spirituality, I recognized that that weird part that other people are seeing is that part of you that's meant to make a difference and to make a change. And, I think each and every one of us have this beautiful current to contribute to the world. And once we recognize and know thyself, that's how we're transforming the world around us. And a lot of people are scared of change. They look at change with they'll judge it, they'll judge something different. And ultimately people will look at reality based on what they know, but people who are growth minded and explorers of this planet will ultimately look at it in a different place, in a different way. And I think each and every one of you are the most courageous souls out there, because it could be very easy and justifiable to look at the world um, in an understandable negative way. But I do find that much like people discovered that the planet was round through exploration and challenging the paradigm of what they saw or what other people told them as reality. I think each and every one of you were able to explore a whole new world in your own way and to find that there's so much more to life than just the body. And I think that's very profound, transcendent and inspiring to myself, that you would have that degree of openness to look at reality in a different way when every logical reason would tell you not to. But I do believe what's important is hopefully through this information, which if it makes sense, take it. If it doesn't, please don't take it. But what I would say is I always believe that what Einstein said is the most important thing um, is life for us, against us, and with us. And it could be very justifiable to feel that everything is against us. But I do believe a gift of, these experiences, such as NDEs, STs, OBs, is that there's something else beyond this reality, which could help out, our connection that life is not random chaos, that there is something connecting the dots. And sometimes when you look at a picture and you see one dot, that's all you see. But when you take a step back, you're able to see different things. And so I think that is a gift of these things, is we're able to really remember that there's more to reality going on than just this. Um, so a little bit about NDEs. You see a gentleman in the right corner, and that's probably someone that many of you are familiar with. His name is Dr. Raymond Moody. He was the man who actually coined the term NDEs in the 70s. He had students that were coming into him, and he worked in academia, and he had a dual doctorate in psychiatry as well as philosophy. So this was before it was pretty cool and accepting and on, documentaries on Netflix. This was a different ballgame that Dr. Raymond Moody was in. But he had, all these students coming to him who had these experiences. And, Raymond, true to form, I'm sure was if you know Raymond, he's one of the nicest men that you'll ever find. Very caring. He's got a birthday coming up, I believe, in a couple of days. He's a Cancerian, and the sign of Cancer rules the home. So it's no wonder why, someone who is the afterlife guy is talking about, having people to remember their homes in a way. But Dr. Raymond Moody coined the term near-death experience, which I believe was incredibly groundbreaking for all of us. Because if there's no term for it, we'd just be walking around, talking in a very disorganized way, not knowing exactly what happened. But Raymond, in his book Life After Life in 1975, was able to have a set criteria that he outlined through his research of what happens. And certainly, I highly recommend checking that out if you were on the fence of what happened to you was an NDE, or you might know a loved one. It could be certainly profound to check out Raymond's work. And certainly he was very daring and pioneering for his time. Working in academia, it was a big career risk that he did. But I credit, the work that he did. But, there's certainly popular figures that have had an NDEs, such as Elizabeth Taylor, you might be familiar with George Lucas from Star Wars, was believed to have an NDE in a motorcycle accident, as well as Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, who is still ahead of its time in its work and working the mental health field. I could certainly say that. But NDEs essentially are intense and vivid and often life transformative experiences that can, go under extreme, physiological trauma, ceasing of brain activity, which happened to myself, anesthesia, cardiac arrest. And so the body is normally flatlined, and yet there's something else going on, which is, again, to material reductionists in the scientific community, medical community, they still do not know or have an answer to why consciousness goes on if the physical is at the very least compromised. It just does not make sense, and there's still not an answer from their vantage point. And some quotes that I have, and the quote as a, if you're familiar with exposure therapy, um, uh, and I work in the field of mental health, exposure therapy essentially is, let's say you have a fear or a phobia, instead of running away from it, you address it. And so what I do in my work is I talk about probably the two biggest fears that a lot of people have, which is a public speaking and also the concept of, I don't like to use the word because I don't believe it, but death. And I believe it's important to really, sometimes life forces us, and I'm sure in our situations we are forced in our, without our own, with it was not our fault, but to look at it in a different way. But the beauty of near-death experiences is that it's the ultimate exposure therapy to the thing that we fear the most. But it goes to the end of time is constructed on a human level. And it's often what people have with near-death experiences that there is no time, that there's a timelessness and no possibility of an ending. It just goes on. Eternity is actualized and shared to others who often remember this grander truth. And why I say remember is um, I do believe now near-death experiences are getting a lot of traction, and I think people are listening to them. Obviously, there's a sense of hope that could be, skeptic could say certainly, but I do believe there's something familiar as to what we're talking about that each person remembers, that we all remember a part of us that goes beyond the body, that once flew, that was unencumbered and free. And, that's the soul. And I think that voice brought you here to connect with parents, helping parents heal, was this part of us that no matter what happened to us in our lifetimes, there's a continuity. That's the only thing, that is real is the love that we are, that we share, that goes on beyond anything else. And so memory, I think, keeps people open to this stuff as they're able to have that degree of memory. Um, Within near-death experiences, not all of them are pleasant. Some could be distressing. They occur to all types of people. Um, and I also will say that they're just indiscriminate with one's cultural or religious background. So there are traditional people who are atheists who had these things. But even more important than that, there are people who have been their whole lifetimes visually or auditorily impaired, who have had NDEs, and all of a sudden they're able to identify color or sounds without ever knowing what those things were, which is fascinating to me. Um, I think the hard part about NDEs, post NDEs, when people come back from them, is the vernacular of the English language. Because, for instance, I'll give an example. For ourselves within our reality, the lights of the color are based on the sun, and so that's what we have to reference. When you cross over and you have these mystical near-death experiences and these euphoric experiences that, I had, there's no color to compare really. We could do our best, but the colors over theirs, the sounds over theirs are so much different than over here. But we do the best with the tools that we have, is what I will say, in the language that we have. But ultimately, it took myself around 2 to 3 decades to really verbalize what happened to myself, which is very congruent with near-death experiences. So just because someone's not talking about their NDE does not mean that it didn't happen. Um, in fact, some people could even suppress or repress what happened to it because it could be a very big psychological and spiritual trauma. I have a colleague named Stephanie Arnold who I was just talking to today. If you're familiar with, she was on Netflix's Surviving Death, and Stephanie, she had a premonition of herself, crossing over during childbirth, which, did happen. And she had a total, NDE while, in labor. And so she was on the Steve Harvey show a couple weeks later when she was recovering. And Steve asked her, "Do you remember anything?" And she said, "No." And then a couple weeks later, she went to someone like myself, like a hypnotist, and she's able to be regressed to when she had her near-death experience, and she was able to have direct evidence of the conversation with the medical staff and all personnel that were there. Which again, we'll get into some other stories of NDEs, but there's an evidential component of NDEs, not just that consciousness goes on, but they're able to have awareness of the factors that are happening around them that there's no way they could possibly know, or Suzanne Giesemann says they're NOEs. There's no other explanations for why they know what they know. Within NDEs, people could have, possibly heightened senses are heightened, out of body experiences. So the soul leaving the body, is oftentimes happen. Something that I don't hear as often, but I do sometimes hear, certainly happened to myself, past life memories, which I know some people will say if time is just one, how could you have something of a past? And I understand, that certainly argument, but there are past life awareness, past life memories, and oftentimes past life memories um, are directly related to the NDE. I know for myself and my own, past life, there was a lot of ties to what I had in my NDEs. So from completion we begin, and that does happen. Um, Connected to loved ones on the other side. I certainly experienced that, and many NDErs experienced that. I know Anita Morjani certainly did. If you ever read Dying to Be Me, and I know she spoke so beautifully, this past conference about her reunion with, her loved ones on the other side. So that does happen as well. Um, the one common theme that people have who have near-death experience that come back with is they ask them to describe God or the universe, and the one word that's always said is love. It's never vengeful, fire and brimstone, nothing like that. If it's, that of a euphoric, mystical, true, full NDE in a way. So that certainly does happen, is an all-loving source, and that's something very far into our reality, because no matter how lovely our spouses, our family, our members are, we're used to, if we do good, we get back good, and if we do bad, it's like we're not accepted, or we get a little bit pushback. But the capacity for a God to love us for who we are, not what we do, is something that all near-death experiences come with, and it's an otherworldly understanding of love, and it's a whole new depth, and I believe what the Greeks attempted in their levels of love. Sense of timelessness, certainly that is something that I experience, where past, present, future is not what we have over here with the linear time and the clock system and calendars and stuff like that. There's just this sea of eternity that people often come back when they have these things. Uh, tunnel-like sensation, which Raymond has said it's more common to use in the Western world, because we tend to use more of that. A sense of a white light sensation once they leave the tunnel and enter the light. I certainly had that. Um, Sometimes people are told that it's not your time, or they have autonomy, which also does happen on a more rare occurrence. It's happened to myself, which you're given that choice to stay, or on the other side, or to continue the life in the physical. And oftentimes a guardian angel encounter, which you see behind me, that really inspired my connection to angels, as I had that as well. Some people will say spirit guide, guardian angels. I'll say, you want to say UK, you want to say Great Britain, London, England, whatever. It's all kind of similar, but I do believe that the majority of us have primary spirit guides. Some people's higher guides, could be their higher selves, I do believe. But the most of us have, primary spirit guides before we get here, who we're contracted to, and that's non-negotiable. And sometimes, we think our guides want a break from us, or we wonder what they're thinking. But I can assure you, they love you more than you could ever imagine. And I had a profound connection with my own guides, which maybe I could get into, which is a two guides that I connected to, my primary guides, and I could say they are the most beautiful beings you could possibly imagine. And I'd say just imagine the most beautiful person that you've ever seen, multiply that by a million, and then imagine the beauty that you see in that individual, that's reciprocated back to you. And you're just the box that we have ourselves in is so limited with the way that the spirit realm sees us. They see each and every one of us in such a different way than we see ourselves. And it's one thing that near-death experiences oftentimes come back with is to learn how important it is to love yourself, the people around you, and to see the real divine spark. And that's something that one of the greatest sculptors of all time, Michelangelo, would always say, like someone would ask him, how does he create his masterpiece? And all he says is he just chips away at the masterpiece that's always there. And I think that's really what the spiritual work is about, is remembering who we are and continuing to cast that beautiful light. Um, you know, so like I said, past life memories and near-death experiences oftentimes, do occur. Um, I'll give an example, in this is certainly a topic, and when I work in the mental health field, that is sensitive, certainly censored from YouTube. But what I would say is this particular topic in itself, they found that the support, on this particular way of passing, goes down around 70% due to the judgment about it or what people have about it. But what I would say is, I do not criminalize this decision, nor does the spirit realm. But when I was able to have my near-death experience, I saw that I made a decision to take my own body, and it was not, you know, I was not judged at all. I was not condemned. I saw, obviously, I'm here today, and I go on. But I saw that how my near-death experience tied into that, where I was in a playground, I had whooping cough, completely suffocated, and I saw that this life in which I felt my back was against the wall, there was no hope, nothing. I saw once again that same feeling that happened to me when I suffocated. In this moment, I surrendered to this beautiful eternal light. And that reminded me of what we're all doing here, tonight is when pain comes, sometimes we could fight that darkness with darkness. And it's important to learn how to cast that light into the pain and to allow ourselves to know that we don't have to do it all alone, that we could surrender, and that through surrendering, we could find our deepest beauty, our greatest strengths. And that's what I found in my NDE, that through surrendering and letting go was when I was able to continually cross over. Um, and, a lot of times there's people like myself who had a near death experience at such a young age. People will say, you're just 3 years old. So, how do you remember this and how is this valid? And what I really learned is there is a certain part of ourselves that has a certain degree of awareness in this body, but we have a much higher awareness that is still connected to the higher consciousness, the upper realms. And so, that's what I really was able to remember in my NDE when I just connected there. I was able to just to connect to my higher self, my soul. And so sometimes we look at people and we just see the body and we think that's all that there is, but we all have antennas to connect. We all have a higher self to connect that's has much more awareness. And so sometimes it takes time for the chronological age to match the old soul age, and the body to really be in congruency with the soul. But sometimes there's a difference, there's a dichotomy, and sometimes there's not. But what I've learned is with people that we love, particularly our children, these are infinite souls. These are beautiful souls that are not. Two things could be true, that yes, they are what we knew them as, and also they're an infinite soul. It's kind of like looking at a chapter of a book and thinking that we know the whole book. That is a part of it, absolutely, and a big part, but there's also so much more to each and every one of our stories that goes far beyond this lifetime in this body. But ultimately, the most important story is the one that we're continually writing within each day that we live. And I believe the quote that says that the universe or God created us because the universe or God loves stories, and the lives that we live are all the stories, of the universe. And the people that we become and what we share, what we experience, those are all stories. That was a quote by Elie Wiesel, who was a Holocaust survivor, who knew, the utmost suffering at the deepest core and was still able to find behind that infinite darkness, he found an eternal summer, as Albert Camus says. Um, so some after effects of near-death experiences is that they often have a heightened sense of connection to the spirit realm. The whole world could be different. It is important to note that sometimes NDEs come with a double-edged sword. Many can experience trauma, grief, and difficulty processing their experiences, particularly veterans who have a very high percentage of near-death experiences. So important to note that at times people could be very frightened or scared to share their experience out of, judgment from other people or misunderstanding. And it's transformative. um, what what they experience is transformative and what they come back with it as well. And so that's why it's important, joining groups like this and other, NDE groups really helps to develop that camaraderie and that ownership. And, they're able to really have a sense of shift of meaning and purpose. And that could often happen with NDEs. Um, What I would also say is, from hearing NDEs, they found, and if you've listened to this interview, I really recommend Dr. Bruce Grayson, who's just on Oprah Winfrey's podcast. And Bruce Grayson is what is on the Mount Rushmore of near-death experience researchers. And he wrote a book called After, and they kind of asked him why he wrote the book After. And so, the book really has to do with, yes, what happens after, but also what happens to near-death experiencers when they experience this and the changes that they have. But more importantly, people who listen to NDEs and what could happen to them. NDEs, really can change people, not only the experiencer themselves, but those who listen to them. As again, there's that bit of memory, that's invoked within their experience. Next slide I have is someone that I really connect to in the spirit realm, Robin Williams. As a child, the movie Hook was my absolute favorite movie. I always ask myself why. And the movie is kind of like a Peter Pan spin-off in a way. Um, but, when I was a kid, I always loved this movie and I just didn't know really why. But, today I really understand. This movie to me, really embodies the spiritual transformative experiences of our near-death experience. And if you haven't watched it, do. Robin was living a very conventional life. He's kind of working in a corporate job or something like that, suit and tie guy. And then all of a sudden he was transported to Neverland to save his children. And, he, just kind of like the window opened and um I think it was something May was Patsy May or something that was in there. And then he was just transported to Neverland. And he, decided like, hey, like I don't want to hang out here. I've done what I need to do. And he comes back. And all of a sudden in the early 90s, he had a cell phone. He just tossed it. And for him, it's like the things that like used to be so important, all these business calls, all these things like that, like those didn't matter. Like the only thing that matters is like the real things that last. And so that experience really it personifies NND, but also the after and how near-death experiences oftentimes the things that we take so seriously that aren't that important in the long run. Um, you know, we lean into the things that matter, the relationships that we have, the impacts that we have, the people in our lives. Those are often really highlighted in NDEs and when they come back. Um, Another thing that happens in NDEs is a brain and mind dichotomy. And, oftentimes when the brain is at a very limited um, vantage point of frequency, is that there's this higher mind that occurs. And so, like I said before, material reductionism really does not know how this works because the body creates consciousness. Then if you have very limited brainwave frequencies, how do people have these profound experiences, where they come from? And so that really separates in a way the brain and the mind, that the brain is rather just a filter, of the mind. And certainly I experienced that in my NDE when I suffocated. I felt my brain literally snap in half, and that's when the spirit realm and God came in due to suffocation. And I just knew that day forward that the brain was simply a filter, which really, allowed myself to really lean into neuro health, brain health, and using meditation, which really could help rewire the brain and also get ourselves into those deepened states of receptivity to higher consciousness. And so when you do meditate, you're able to get your brains out of gamma, which is really, very scattered in a way, typing on a computer a million miles an hour, and you get your brain waves to more of the alpha cool California things. And if you really get deep, you get them into theta. Delta is kind of like Delta Airlines. That's when you're sleeping. So if anything else, when you're meditating, that allows the brain to be a beautiful filter between the two worlds. And that's when those synchronicities, those signs, those messages come through like a door opening, and you feel this wind and this voice beyond yours coming in. And it's a beautiful sensation to certainly have. Um, Myself at 3 years old when I was about to have my NDE, just a little bit, because I know we're a little bit crunched on time, but I had my NDE when I went to a playground as a child. At the time, I had pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough. Ironically, I was in a playground climbing a ladder onto a slide. So you think of, the character Jacob, who is also the reference of all my work. Jacob was running for his life from his brother Esau, and he had a dream of the angels going up and down the ladder. And so, God sometimes, the spirit realm sometimes works in allegorical and symbolic ways, but I completely suffocated, and I had my NDE, had a full crossing over experience, like I said, saw, infinite array, infinite sea of angels in front of me, my spirit guides, soul family, previous lifetimes and premonitions of the work that I was doing. And it's something that sticks with me every day. And I'm glad that I had it because I recognized the gift wasn't to hold on to, but the gift was really to give it away. And that's really a Picasso quote that the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of it is to give it to others. Um, One of the biggest takeaways that I learned from my NDE is how powerful our souls are. Is that, our souls are so powerful that transitioning of the body can't stop us, makes us wonder what can. And so ultimately, when my body wasn't working, there's something else going on. And that just reminded me that we continue, we go on. That's the thing that is certainly in the higher realms real. And it's not to diminish or dismiss what we do feel on a human level. I think that's very significant. We have to honor that. That would be dishonorable to not honor those real feelings. But I do believe through feelings, those could lead to healings in a way. But I do think what NDs personify the continuity of our loved ones, that, they go on, and hopefully we could give ourselves permission to. Um, Ultimately, when a loved one transitions, it's transformative for that loved one. But I think finding what people oftentimes find, it's also can be transformative for ourselves. We're able to have a new outlook on reality that possibly couldn't happen. Obviously, we wish everything to be different, but ultimately, through that shakeup period, much like a near-death experience, we could have a whole new world that we see. Um, and that's very radical in a way, because certainly when a loved one does transition, it could feel like a whole world stops, and everyone else is going on with their stuff. And I think people oftentimes find a different reality within time, but it's important to be where your feet are at, to be patient, and to honor both the human, and the spirit. Um, just quickly, I have a picture here in the bottom right corner of a chocolate bar. um, One story that I want to share is a colleague named Trisha Barker. She was having her NDE when she was in college, and her father, who's a big health nut, was, in the basement of the hospital eating a chocolate bar when Trisha was having her NDE. And so when she woke up, one of the first things I believe she said to her father is like, "Dad, why were you eating a chocolate bar?" And he said, "I thought you were gone, and I was stressed out." And so unless Trisha got off the hospital bed, walked down to the basement, how would she know that her dad was eating a chocolate bar? And logically, she's never seen her dad having a chocolate bar. So what would, make her have it? The probability of him doing that and her seeing that is very slim. So again, these are, illustrations of evidential NDEs. Um, Another one is a shared death experience, was certainly Elizabeth experienced as well. Shared death experiences are profound, and if you ask Raymond, they're even more impressive in a way because everything in the body is the same, like nothing's physiologically changed. and yet, you feel a sense of connection to the loved one that passed, that continued. I don't say passed because they do go on. I do apologize. With a shared death experience, I think there are certainly different layers of it. I oftentimes have same thing with NDEs. Oftentimes people who have their dog, go, they'll oftentimes feel this light in this room or this air coming into this room. So sometimes people will have a full crossing over experience and a shared death experience where they're there with their loved ones and their angels, and they get to a certain point in their soul family, or you just feel something different. Whatever that is, it's important to not dismiss that or judge that, and to see that in a way of a hello from heaven, and just like this whisper and this energy that happens, and it can be certainly a gift. And certainly Elizabeth is someone who's been living out that gift and sharing her experience to help out the world and humanity. And so, that again is congruent with what I said. These experiences by themselves may not necessarily change ourselves, but what we do with them, I think the purpose in any way is to relate to other people, to share it, and that could empower other people to remember who they are as well. Certainly, if you're interested in learning more about shared death experiences, I really would recommend looking at William Peters. He has a shared death experience in a crossing over project. He does a lot of research on this. So if you are interested in really understanding what this phenomenon is, or for yourself or a loved one, do check out William Peters. He's got a lot of really good research. For time's sake, I would love to read this, but this is just some of the shared crossing over research project. Another one that happens is terminal lucidity, which again works very similarly to an NDE. Someone who studied this a lot was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She actually studied near-death experience as well as this phenomenon as well. And you may be familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross from universalizing five stages of grief, and David Kessler, who's a friend of helping parents heal, since improvised the sixth stage, which is finding meaning. But again, the nonlinearity, as we know, that grief has, but Elizabeth was great in allowing grief to be mm, universalized, a household name, and something that people could identify and label as, and really led to a lot of more psychoeducation and awareness of our experiences and normalization. But terminal lucidity oftentimes happens when, our loved ones are, maybe in the process of crossing over, and oftentimes they feel this sense of heightened awareness. They oftentimes could feel loved ones with their hands crossing in the corner of the room, or seeing figures in rooms, and they are able to have a lot of clarity. The phenomenon that's very similar they found through neuro studies is brainwave activities during terminal lucidities actually decreases a lot, much like a near-death experience, and yet consciousness is very heightened. And so oftentimes there's a sense of excitement, like, oh my God, they're turning a corner, but in reality, it's an incubation and adjustment to crossing over. But again, it really speaks to that brain-mind dichotomy that occurs, as well as how our loved ones and the satellites in the heavens are connected to us in every moment. And that filter is a lot more open in a way from being at a lower activity to some degree. But this that is again something that maybe your loved ones may experience. For instance, an evidential experience of this was, I had a loved one who was, in hospice, and she said to me, if you look at a picture of a family, some participants may look different, but you look at the eyes, the window of, of the soul, there's something connecting each family member that goes beyond this body. And I thought that was pretty cool. And these were her last words before she went on and continued her journey. But I was getting a reading from an evidential medium, and she was picking up on my aunt, and she says, "Why does she keep on telling me the word picture, picture?" I knew that was evidence of her message of forever family, of soul family, and the interconnectivity that we all have. And it was pretty cool to get that validation. But again, do look out if our loved ones are talking to spirits, if they're saying that. And it's important, obviously, where they're at for them to have competency and awareness of what they're going through. Um, Again, in the VA, veterans. Um, Veterans are not discriminated from near-death experiences. In fact, they make up about 25 to 48% of NDEs. So again, considerably higher than the population. Oftentimes, not always. They may come from environments that may be a little bit more traditional and dismissive of these things. So that's why, they're hidden. But I know when I work with IANs, there was a specific group on veterans who had NDEs, and it was very healing to see people coming from these, kind of like militant backgrounds talking about their experiences and owning it. And we've seen the beauty of that with people that we know, such as Suzanne Giesemann, who was, I do believe, a commander. She was in the Navy, I know, but a very high-ranking official, obviously in the Navy, and she had her own transformative experience as well. So, um, finding organizations to talk to and to work with, and people that could accept is very important. Um, and just some tools, for these things before we close is, as I mentioned, meditation, very important. I know that's a buzzword that turns off some people, and I understand. But thankfully, it's been really more universalized, and I think obviously Harvard studies has really been able to validate the hard neuro studies what meditation can do, in the transformation of the brain and how the development of neuroplasticity within the brain. But I certainly do believe that brain health is a big part of mental health. And what they found with meditation, it really allows the brain to just, let go of a lot of stress. Reducing inflammation is also a big factor that improves mood, decreases stress, and it also leads to a lot more emotional regulation from the amygdala within the brain, as well as impulse control. But from a spiritual perspective, beyond mental health, um, from a spiritual perspective, meditation can really help to clean that filter. I always work with my clients. I work with kids and adolescents, oftentimes have ADHD and maybe some impulse control in their, due to their, neurological dispositions and stuff like that. So we obviously congruent with some medication management and psychotherapeutic work. We really try to work on impulse control. And I feel for them because obviously when they're younger, the frontal lobe of the brain is severely underdeveloped as well. So that adds cumulative disadvantages for the structure that they're in. But we always talk about the filters, right? And we always say like, if you have a tank of water and if you don't have a clean filter, it's not going to be as great. But if you constantly work on that filter, clear it out, you're going to have a beautiful, pure body of water. And so that's the same thing as the lives that we live in working with really the brain to be that clear filter so that we're having the streamline of higher consciousness, we're connected to messages. And there's a concept certainly in mindfulness called flow readiness, where we're not working against life, but we're feeling this force that's guiding us. And I know a lot of people who've mastered their own fields have really discussed, being in that flow or the eye of the hurricane, as they say. Other forms that could be very helpful, and I know recently we had a training, I do believe helping parents heal on this phenomenon called IADC, induce after death communication. Um, that's a form of EMDR really established by a man by Alan Botkin, who I do believe worked with the VA in Chicago in 2004, and he was doing EMDR, and he found that people were able to have these connections. As you know, the eyes are very much related to the brain. But they're finding also that people who've had these transformative experiences, they're able to have something called spiritual activation, which, in a way, through EMDR, they're able to go to that place, whether that's an NDE, spiritual transformative experiences, an out of body experience, and go to that place and really extract a lot more information from those experiences. And obviously, Reiki is great, EFT, tapping. Regression therapy is another, big one. I know we have 2 or 3 minutes. And lastly, for all of you, I know some people will feel left out if they haven't had one of these experiences, or envy may occur, obviously, or they'll feel, God is looking out for the universe is looking out for this person, but I'm chopped liver, whatever. And I do believe each and every one of you sitting here today, in your own ways, had a transformative experiences. And to me, the word trans, you have to look at the word transformative. The word transform comes from trans and form, which just generally means changing shape. And just as, your loved ones in the satellites have gone on and changed form, so too does your own consciousness as well, and the connection that you have. It just changes form. The dynamic doesn't change, the love doesn't change, that goes on. So I do believe in your own way, through going through it you have gone through, there's a transformation that you have. And I oftentimes see people who go through this mediumistic abilities are there, or at the very least, a sense of shift of perspective. And I do believe that that does happen. And I do applaud each and every one of you because I do believe you've all, transformed consciousness in your own way. And as a result, humanity's in a different vantage point because I do believe each and every one of us is meant to connect this infinite beauty to shine that to the world. And we're all doing that as shining lights here with helping parents heal. And that makes the world a much brighter place. And I say, don't, as Dr. King says, don't fight darkness with darkness, and only light could really work that out. And by each and every one of you connecting to this light and your loved one's light, you're shining this beautiful light casted, onto this planet. And so, just as the sun, the earth needs a sun to go on, each and every one of us has a star, has a light, that's needed for continuity of this planet. And we're dependent on that to go on. Um, and so, like I said, strength is often found through surrender. So if you're struggling right now, it's a big power to surrender. It's not a sign of weakness or giving up, but giving in to that beauty that is always there. And so, that's what I'll say. And so, um, and I do believe it's important for us to recognize that consciousness is a gift, connectivity is a gift, empowering others to really connect to it is another gift, as we are all lights here as this lighthouse casting a brilliant light. And you know the lighthouse just shines at people. It doesn't need to go anywhere. It just casts its own light just by being what it is. And I think that's what each and every one of you are doing by connecting to this light. And you're really understanding a lot that this light and could be a gift, and you're sharing it to those that you encounter. Um, so I don't know if you have time for questions and answers. Certainly,
Well,
you can reach me on my website if there are any. Um, and I wish we could do the meditation, but please do go to my YouTube page. It's Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. You could find the meditation there as well. These are my two books and some of the other stuff. But website, all that stuff is over there. But Elizabeth, do we have any questions or thoughts
well,
or
I was
sharings?
going to first say that this was wonderful to hear all of
Thank
this.
you.
And I love the fact that you talked about us as well, and that we are shining light parents because we've gone through something that has been a spiritually transformative experience,
Hmm.
which is having our child transition, or I say pass, because our children are
Hmm.
passing from one world to the next. So they're
Hmm.
passing from here to the other side. And I love the term continuation of life, I guess. This is another
Hmm.
wonderful term. But what I was also going to say is that I think it's exciting to know that you don't have to have a near-death experience to be
Hmm.
able to have a spiritually transformative experience. You don't have to be at the point of actually transitioning yourself to have that happen.
Hmm.
And one of the things that Bill and Judy Guggenheim wrote about were these after-death communications. So
Mhm,
these ADCs. And that book that you were talking about,
mhm,
Hello from Heaven,
mhm,
is one that is it's dearly beloved by all of our parents. And I think that if anyone doesn't know about Bill and Judy, it'd be good for them to take a look at our YouTube site, because we have interviews with Bill. They separated many years ago, but
mhm,
Bill continued to speak about ADCs until he transitioned about 2 years ago.
mm,
And then Dr. Raymond Moody, we've
mhm,
interviewed him as well. And Jacob, I am just so grateful to you for sharing this experience that was very scary, I'm sure, when you had
mhm,
it. And here you've been able to build a life and help so many others through this spiritually transformative experience, which was your near-death experience, which
mhm.
was very difficult to understand at the time. And um, I would love for you to come back and do a meditation with us, and maybe we could also have questions and answers at that time. That would be something that we could do as well, if you would be
Mhm.
willing to come back. And I truly appreciate it. We always ask everyone to say thank you and good evening. If you guys would like to do so, please go ahead and unmute yourselves. And
Yes, thanks, Jacob. It was a great night.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Jacob.
Thank you very
thank
much.
you,
Great.
Jacob.
God bless.
Thank you
so much,
Thank
Jacob.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank you
all
very
for being
much.
here.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
evening.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Good night,
Thank
Bye,
you so
everybody.
Jacob.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.